Hello, my name is Benjamin, but you may call me Jam, and it's time for the return of Exercises in Blue, a Magic the Gathering video series where I reimagine all the different things that a mono blue commander deck can be. Inspired by Exercices de Style, a short story collection by Raymond Queneau, where he tells one quick little tale and then retells that tale 99 different ways. My version is to create 99 different mono blue commander decks before I get burned out, distracted, or simply lose interest. Simple enough concept, but perhaps you could use some context. For example, who the hell am I? Other than a person named Jam who likes magic cards. Well, I'd love to tell you more about myself, but I'm really trying to stay focused on this whole deck building thing, so my backstory will have to wait. Unless... See, I've spent the last few weeks in a frenzied whirl, brainstorming, building and revising and playtesting, in between the bewildering and exhausting demands of everyday life. Devising dozens of decks, scores of decks. Some based on silly themes, some based on strategy. We've got some kindred in there, we've got formats that we're playing with, variants that we're playing with. All of the decks are categorical. But for today's video, let's begin with some magic cards that are autobiographical. Our story starts around the early 2000s. Although it might have been a little before that, I don't keep track of precise timelines. But it did start somewhere in that 19-2000 range.
Get the cool. Get the cool shine.
My first paid job as a child was feeding my neighbor's cat while they were out of town. While the neighbor was out of town. The cat stayed home, I fed the cat. One time when I came over, there were these colorful playing cards that I found just laid out randomly on the couch. Turned out they'd been left behind by some visiting cousin. The neighbor said I could have them. This was not a full deck, these were just loose cards from what I would later learn was the Paul McCabe 1997 World Championship deck, gold bordered and everything. My very first Magic cards ever were Incinerate and Knight of the Mists. Not that Incinerate's in the deck, I would almost never break Commander's color identity rule. By the time my curiosity blossomed into earnest collecting, the Urza's block was just wrapping up, and Mercadian Masks was the newest thing to hit the scene. It was colorful, flavorful, and story-driven. It referenced so many reoccurring characters that, being a big reader, I was inspired to go back and read the novels just to learn all about the tales of these fascinating people. The next phase, the 2000s, started off strong, optimistic. The Invasion block really emphasized color combinations, so I experimented with all kinds of different strategies and play styles. I was also incredibly fortunate to have a handful of kind, supportive, beautifully nerdy friends with whom to play. For us, Magic the Gathering was a fun, funky game which drew upon our imagination and our sense of humor. It was essentially rectangular Dungeons and Dragons, and no one had to DM. But by high school, a lot of my friends had ended up moving away to other schools, other cities, other states. And while social adaptation was a huge struggle for me, the main setback came from capitalism. Like the Plane of Wrath merging maliciously onto Dominaria, my playgroup was gradually replaced by strangers who brought a Moneyball mentality to Magic cards. What began as creative gameplay, fantasy vibes, friendly hijinks, turned into highly competitive builds founded on the unsubtle flexing of the purses and wallets of one's parents. A huge surge of disillusionment, to be sure. My first taste of power creep really drove home the inevitable ick. Once Wizards introduced the indestructible keyword, I just started to feel like my money and my free time were better spent elsewhere. Fast forward to the 2010s, post-high school, post-college, post-hometown. I moved to a new state, met a new partner, made lots of new, wonderful friends. My life had plenty of growth recovery, and self-reflection. Not a lot of Magic cards, except for the 2014 Duels of the Planeswalkers game on Steam. Oof. Was an absolute blast. Mostly because the card selection was finite, you acquired them sequentially instead of randomly, and while you could play against other humans online, the ample amount of single-player content meant that you certainly did not need to. And with that, I was at peace. Until my partner discovered the new Magic block that came out back then, Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon, whose themes of gothic horror really spoke to her gothy heart. So we briefly dipped a toe back in the mana pool, so to speak. It didn't last long, our attention shifted by the time Kaladesh was released. But before we moved on, I did make an interesting discovery. Looking back at the original Innistrad set from 2011, I noticed that they'd introduced an alternate win condition unlike any I'd ever seen before. No, I was no stranger to alt wins. They had one of each color back in the Odyssey block. Hell, in the good old days, all my friends tried to get that coalition victory. But a card that turned a mill loss into a lab win. Intriguing. Finally, we reach the 2020s. Quarantine and everything after. Magic sets came and went, not many crossed my path, but when they did, they seemed pretty cool. It was a fairy tale set, a haunted house set, a Redwall Wind of the Willows set. Lovely stuff. Then, just last year, the stars began to align. I'd already been a fangirl of the YouTubist named Tulok the Barbarian. He makes creative Elden Ring videos, he makes creative D&D characters. Late 2024, he starts making creative Magic decks, and then early 2025, Aether Drift gets released. I'm checking it out and thinking, okay, Wizards does pod racing. Sounds fun. And at some point, I come across this fine fellow, the vowelless Vnwxt, with extraordinary style, zero interest in fighting, and the kind of card draw ability so simple, so powerful, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept daydreaming of different decks that I could make with him, different strategies I could use with him. Hell, I dressed up as him for Halloween. Shout out to my legendary partner for constructing that costume. And because I am a maximalist at heart and I enjoy adding to a creation so much more than I do subtracting from it, I devised this video series. It's really just a coping mechanism for building different Vnwxt strategies. Why limit myself to 99 cards when I could make 99 decks? In fact, I'm such a fan of Vnwxt, I came up with this second deck, in which we deploy multiple clones of him. Now typically, I'm a tremendous fan of clone or copying cards because they're literally more of something I already know and love. And the fact that Blue lets us do this with legendary creatures or permanents as well, it's just so very truly delicious and wonderful. I was originally going to make a generic clone deck for the Exercises in Blue series, but in my heart of hearts, the only target creature that I was ever going to want to target with it, 99 times out of 100, will just be Vnwxt himself. So for this next deck, I invite you to join me on a journey of multiplicity, where we start with one big eye, and then we get a whole lot more. This is Exercises in Blue, so you know how we do. We got 34 of those, 15 of these, which gives 50 spots left to play with as we please. The main attraction for a Clone Your Commander deck, the clones themselves. You've got 12 potent game pieces here to produce supplemental Vnwxts. Some of these might look familiar because the last time I featured them, they were cosplaying as non-basic lands. Today they will resume their roles as cheaters, but rather than perpetuating proper noun fraud, they'll be circumventing Commander's singleton rule. Very fun breaking that rule. We'll do more of that another time. Let me introduce some new clones who bite their thumb at the legendary limit. Spark Double makes a version of Vnwxt who can actually throw hands for a whole point of damage. Auton Soldier makes a Robo Vnwxt. If you swing out with him, he creates Vnwxt triplets. I urge you not to do this. Violence is not Vnwxt's job. At least not in this deck. K-Face Sakashima, distinct from the Imposter, just turns off the legendary rule for you altogether. He'll still be legendary if he comes in as a copy of Vnwxt, which we can actually profit from in just a minute. Now that does it for physical clones, but we're also making clone tokens, and ironically, the best ways to get around copyright infringement come from external IPs. Avatar, Baldur's Gate, Spider-Man, Doctor Who. To others, they are precious franchises trapped in the clutches of ruthless, unfeeling corporations. To me, they are a cabal of necromancers, quietly converging in the dead of night, combining their powers in an inscrutable ritual to resurrect the ancient meme of, "Yo dog, we heard you like Vnwxt, so we got some Vnwxt for your Vnwxt so you can draw more cards when you draw more cards." Kooky game design, yes, pretty indulgent as well. So, what's our support system? Well, legend copying clones aren't cheap, although they are getting cheaper. So we've got 1.5 dozen ramp spells, including rocks, dorks, discounts, and retreat to Coralhelm. By the end of this series, I hope you will fall in love with unhinged card draw, but I also hope you will fall in love with unhinged land ramping. It's bliss. The Relic and the Shaku also benefit from having multiple legends on the field. Some of our clones do not help with this, but some do, so they count. As for our card draw, there isn't any. We do have a cute quartet of precognition engines to peek at our library and play cards off the top. That's about it, because ideally we're rocking plural Vnwxts for exponential card draw. When doubling becomes quadrupling becomes octupling, our draw phase will catch us picking up 8 cards every turn, or more depending on the amount of Vnwxts. It is for this reason that we have omitted conventional card draw, because in this case something like Ponder would outperform Overflowing Insight, and any of the Thirst cards would hand us a quarter of our deck. An intoxicating notion, maybe we'll flirt with that later, but for now our likeliest success will come from a stabler game plan. If our squad is nothing more than 1-1 baby queens and a kick line of 0-4 game show hosts, then it's our responsibility to keep them all out of trouble. Enter the Scryfall search engine tag, protects creature. Also, since many of these are single target spells, they will activate Vesuvian Diplomancy, in addition to our legend copying sorceries, which are also single targets, meaning that we can clone Vnwxt while we're cloning Vnwxt. Yeah, you thought I was joking with the Yo Dog meme. You'll learn. Finally, we got some classic stopgaps to make sure that we can either win or at least not lose when we have 10 Vnwxts in play and try to touch 1024 cards at the top of our turn. Jeff, Jesu, and the very pretty Sea Lady will hand us a dub. Ormos and the Conundrum will keep us from accidentally tripping and falling face first onto an L. And there you have it. It's a silly deck, but if you haven't learned by now, I'm a silly guy. And while there are no shortage of YouTubists who offer guides for raw competitive power, my priorities for this card game are creativity and amusement, while still angling to win, if left to my own preposterous devices. Links to these decks will live down in the description of the video. If you have any suggestions for me, you are cordially invited to relay that information to me in comment form. With that, I conclude this installment of Exercises in Blue. You may still call me Jam, and for those of you who are watching and or listening, I thank you for your time and attention. Mwah. Oh, right. Intoxicating card draw. Most of the decks in this video series already feature that sort of thing. The clone deck does not need instants and sorceries to take advantage of that. Our draw phase will suffice. However, Ormos does have an activated ability, letting you discard 3 cards to draw 5. Vnwxt, by himself, already turns this into 10. A single clone of Vnwxt makes this 20 cards for 3 mana. 3 Vnwxts makes it 40, nearly half the deck. A verbose, homunculus barbershop quartet will let Ormos draw 80 cards with 1 activation. By the time Ormos has entered the chat, your library may not have 80 cards in it. The moral of this story? When piloting any Vnwxt deck, always keep track of the number of cards that you have in every zone. You use a life tracker app, you do the same thing for your library. Don't let your victory turn into a lobotomy just because you left your abacus at home.